So directly reaching out to those students through centers such as SESA, through the Dream Center, the CDA, TRIO, and other student university departments that have day-to-day contact with those students, getting the word out that way directly with that face contact. One other thing that we want to try doing, and this one we still need to work out a plan on, but I don't know if anyone's looked into this, is to revisit the pay structure and see if we can increase the financial compensation for students to get involved, where maybe they have some competing financial priorities, such as being a parent or needing to send money back home or whatever that may be, so that they can see that leadership position as being viable time-wise. So those are a few of our ideas in that realm.
All right, thank you. Our next question is about parking. One of the biggest complaints from you students is campus parking. What are your plans to reduce the stress of parking on campus? Let's begin with the Nassar ticket.
Thank you so much. Parking's a tricky question, right? And I think we want to do this in a number of ways. Number one, and it falls under our safety platform, we want to increase the number of bus routes on campus, making them go for longer and also go on weekends, to encourage sustainable usage, or sustainable means, to decrease the number of cars on campus, but also to keep students safer for longer. Furthermore, we also want to increase the number of bike parking areas on campus in order to, again, to incentivize that. But in terms of vehicle parking in particular, one of the things that the Nassar ticket is advocating for is for one lot on campus to become free completely after 6 p.m. In order to encourage students and to give them a place to vote, considering all financial burdens that students have. Some individuals don't have access or the means to make that. Furthermore, we want to also encourage that all A permit areas after a later time, such as 7 or 8, become free. The number of A permit parking spots on campus greatly outnumbers the number of U spots on campus, and if we were able to expand those efforts beyond what the U does right now, I think that would very much help with parking. Furthermore, I want to work with community services. We've already reached out a couple of times, but it's not finalized by any means, of decreasing the price of permits. The permit prices range from $80 to $648 for basic student parking and such. So finding ways to decrease those prices in order to make it both accessible and affordable for students is one of the Nassar ticket's priorities.
Thank you. The Hardenbrook ticket?
For this question, I'd like to invite Carlos to the stage to answer it.
Hi. So parking is a very big problem here at the U, as we all know. It's impacted most of us in some way or another, but more than just parking, we have a transportation problem here at the U, whether it is with a car, by train, or by bus. And so while we think that parking is one of the issues that needs to be addressed, it is only part of the problem, and all of it would need to be solved. So one of the things is we are a commuter campus, and with the building of new dorms on campus, there's kind of a disconnect between what we say we are and what we're becoming. So as these dorms are getting built, we're taking out parking, and so without an increase in access to other methods of transportation, parking is becoming more of an issue. So we have talked about how to incentivize people to use other modes of transportation, and one of the problems that a lot of us face is deciding if we can spend that much time on public transportation, or if we miss that bus, and the next one doesn't come for 15 minutes, can we be 15 minutes late to a 50-minute class? Not really. Can we be 15 minutes late to a job on campus we're expected to be on time? Not really. So there are a lot of things that go into this, and one of the solutions that we really would like to look into is a park and ride, where we would offer additional parking in other locations and have direct routes, whether by a UTA operated bus or by the U. So that way we will be able to get people to and from the U in a manner that's time efficient and also more environmentally efficient.
I apologize, I forgot to tell our candidates that if they would like to swap out any of their candidates, they are welcome to do so. Would you like to do that from ticket?
No.
Okay, all right. Then it is to you.
Perfect. I really appreciate the things that Walker and Carlos touched on. because it is a very tricky situation. The thing that we're dealing with is that overall, the school is transitioning towards becoming a more residential campus, and that's just kind of the plan. But we are still a commuter campus, and so we have to find creative solutions to navigate this transition in a way that doesn't kind of disenfranchise those who do commute on campus. I think that one thing that all three of us can agree on is that on-campus mobility is going to be huge if we are supposed to be transitioning towards a commuter campus. And so increasing on-campus shuttles will be huge, but also working with UTA to increase their buses and also extend the times that they come to this campus will be huge as well. As it pertains to parking itself, I really like the thing that BU has already started doing, which is the introduction of hybrid lots, where some A lots turn into U lots after a certain period of time. And I'm thinking that we should do that for all A lots, and that on top of that, we should move the time up even earlier. Currently, it's a bit later in the day, and most students who are coming to campus come because they need to get to class, and most students who are coming to class aren't necessarily coming to class later in the day. And so I think a combination of all of these things is going to be the best way that we can navigate this transition. So I'll close it there.
All right, thank you. Our next topic will be around hate speech, so if any of the candidates would like to swap out, now is a good time to do so. All right. Over the past several years, there have been high-profile cases of hate speech on campus. What are your plans to combat racism and discrimination on campus? Let's begin with the Hardenbrook ticket.
So currently the U kind of operates on a reactionary basis when it comes to hate speech. When something happens on campus, we release a statement, which has generally been the same statement over the past few years, or maybe most of the years, at least that I've been here. And this protocol is not only harmful, but it doesn't address the root issue to this hate, which is that this kind of behavior on our campus allows the hate to grow. These methods have shown to be very effective both here, but also nationwide in recruiting students to white nationalist movements and things like that. So one thing that we would like to do is we'd like to implement an annual climate survey. They've already done one this year, but we might like to make that a regular thing. We also want to continue on with holding forums across campus where students can come and talk about these issues, share their concerns, say what they want to hear. However, that's not the only thing we want to do. By only relying on those forums, you kind of put the burden on students that are afflicted by these issues, students of color and other minority groups. So what would we want to do? So what I'd like to do is to turn to other campuses around the world, mostly in like the UC area. They've had some campuses that have had a lot of success with tackling these issues by having sort of like national conference type events, hackathon type events, and also no hate weeks. I think it was UC Riverside, they have a hate and bias response team that they've enacted to work on this issue. I think finally I just want to say this issue of hate speech on campus and these white nationalist groups coming on campus to recruit students is a criminal issue. So our police department really needs to also step up to the plate on this issue, work with the local police department, which is a larger issue in itself, but also with national agencies to stop this behavior before it comes on our campus.
All right, thank you. The Coon ticket.
I very much agree with what Rebecca mentioned. The U is primarily reactionary when it comes to these events and incidences. I think that one really big highlight is the task force that we have here. And so in looking at that, I think that we have to kind of approach it in three different ways. One, more prevention focus, which would involve empowering the task force, and then also going into different colleges and clubs and organizations, and working with them to ensure that their individual members are maintaining and promoting a healthy and safe climate within their spaces. Unfortunately, these incidents still happen, and you still have to react. And so doing so very swiftly, a statement is useful, but we can't have it be the thing we lean on, is huge. We can't have it be the thing that we lean on. But then in addition, we also have to make sure that we're not giving these groups the attention that they're seeking, but the attention that it truly deserves. You give it the attention that is necessary to ensure it doesn't happen again, but you don't elevate their platform any further, as to prevent the fear increasing among students and faculty on this campus.
Thank you. The Nassar ticket.
Thank you so much. Both of you had excellent answers to this that, of course, we definitely agree upon. One of the things that also the Nassar ticket wants to do, however, as hate crimes are generally and very underreported no matter where you are, the University of Utah actually has an app necessarily, the Geography Department developed, where you can anonymously report hate crimes throughout campus. And this is something that the Nassar ticket wants to further expand and reinforce to all students as a method to advocate for themselves. We want to further accumulate all the data that we have seen from and is happening. We also want to make sure that every policy is more specific. In terms of other universities, our policies against hate speech and inclusion and everything else are somewhat ambiguous. Now, they are great, and especially for where we live. However, I think they can always go a step further, as many of us, I'm sure, could agree, everything can become more inclusive to everyone around us. And I think that's something we all need to advocate for. Whether that is through, again, this app, or whether it is through developing an ad hoc committee to directly take care of not only hate speech and hate crimes, but also policies to make sure they're inclusive to those who are different genders, sexual orientation, race, religion, you name it. But also, furthermore, making sure that we are taking care of our students. I think, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of transparency and advocacy, those forums that allow us to decide together on how ASUU, the student community, will address these issues will also be beneficial. I don't think coming up with a response that, again, as both of you were saying, to highlight these groups is best, but letting students know that we're there for them and that you deserve the respect that you should have as a human being is best. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next topic will be campus safety, if anyone wants to swap out candidates. All right. In the past 2 years, the U's administration has received sharp criticism for their handling of campus safety. What are the most important steps the U can take to make campus safe for everyone? Let's begin with the Coombe ticket.
Okay. Thanks for having me here, everybody else. I appreciate it. One of the biggest things that I think we've discussed as a group, and even among other safety meetings external to this, specifically being Unsafe U and Safe U, and even little things that they've put together with the police department to get better student feedback on this issue. One of the main things that they brought up is just that students right now don't feel like there's been enough accountability taken. When we're little, we're told to our parents, you do something wrong, you own up to it, and then you accept the consequences, and then you move on and you make things better. And so I think that's where we're having kind of this awkward standstill where we're not making any sort of progress or steps towards actually fixing the root issue. And I think that a lot of that lies within the trust between student and administration. And so one of the best ways to remedy this would be to actually focus on having students and administration, whether that's the university police force or whether that's actual administrative officials who people don't feel comfortable with at this time, deciding what's valuable to us and what we want to talk about in these next upcoming discussions. I think having these one-on-one discussions has been valuable to me personally, but obviously not everyone has the time for that, so developing a platform or a space for more people to have these kind of discussions would be really valuable. Also recognizing too that we are people first and that a lot of things happen, and I think that it's important to recognize that from a student level, but also an administrative level too. So just kind of breaking things down to the fact that we are people.
Thank you. The master ticket.
Being a female on this campus, we've obviously felt the unsafeness that we have on campus. And as a ticket, we want to really ensure that our students feel safe when they come to campus. We don't want them to have to worry about their safety and who's around them. We want them to worry about school and their priorities here on this campus. One of the things we want to do as a ticket is establish a 5-year plan. And with that plan, we want to enroll out more cars in the Safe Ride app. And so this will ensure that students will have more accessibility and to get to their cars at night and to make sure that they have a ride without waiting for 30 minutes plus each time they request it. Immediately, we want to make sure that there is more of a police watch in areas that are heavily populated on campus, especially at night. We want to also expand the times that the buildings are open for students to study on campus. This will also ensure that students are together and that they have a platform to really communicate with, while also having that police presence there to make sure that they can get to their cars in a safe and timely manner. We've also agreed with a lot of the Dean of Students' efforts already towards this goal, as well as with the new police building being put on campus. We think that it's very important to have that presence here and to show that we are making sure our students are watched out for and that we want to make sure that every student feels safe and has someone looking out for them.
Thank you. The Hardin Brook ticket.
So all three, Devin, Carlos, and I are 3 of several co-founders of Unsafe U. So we've been having these conversations and doing this work for the past year. Unsafe U is known as being kind of like an action-based group, but we have been having very regular meetings with administration, both Vice President Stan Reed and Laurie McDonald, as well as with our new Chief Safety Officer, Marlon Lynch. So one of our first things on day 1 would be to implement and adopt all of the recommendations and demands that Unsafe U has made. There's about 30 of them. Including launching an annual campus climate survey, expanding the Safe Ride programs, as was already mentioned, to run longer hours and weekends, as well as several other things, including having a student bill of rights, right? We can include safety measures in there. So yeah, that would be really our first main thing. The second thing, this was something that we talked about a lot with administration in those meetings, is we have to take this fight on as students, unfortunately. I know that kind of puts a lot of burden on this, but we're going to have to continue to push the administration to take students seriously and let students have a seat at the decision-making table. So not only should we have these campus listening forums that have been happening this year, we should also have students at the table making decisions at the same decision-making level as, say, President Watkins. So that would be really our main push on safety.
Okay, thank you. And our final topic before we turn to the audience has to do with resources on campus. So if you want to switch any of your candidates, please do so now. All right. Part of the Barnes administration included expanding resources on campus, particularly with the Counseling Center and the Center for Student Wellness. For your ticket, what is the most important resource that needs to be expanded for students? How do you plan to address that? And let's begin with the master ticket.
Thank you so much. Wow, the most important one. That did throw me off guard because I think all of them are really important. I think the Center for Disabilities, I think Equity and Diversity, I think the Wellness Center, all of them are incredibly important in creating a space for students to become who they want to be and to help students further all of their goals and such. I know individuals, for example, from the Women's Resource Center who have gotten amazing help and have grown so much, from scholarships to counseling, etc. I know individuals who have reached out to the Dean of Students who have also been able to work past a lot of stuff that have troubled them. But of course, to answer the question in particular, I would say the Wellness Center, not only do I think mental health is a major issue on this campus, but I also think it does help us with a lot of issues. Number one, I think it can help students find their place on campus. I think it can help them figure out what they're comfortable with as they get through that first level of anxiety, especially for freshmen who are coming in not knowing what a college campus is like, and also not knowing, maybe they're from out of state and don't know who to hang out with and such. I also think it's important because not only that, I'm a firm believer in mental health and doing everything you can with counseling and such to improve mental health. I think therapy is a godsend. Would not be here without it. And I think a lot of students would feel the same, being able to take the time to get an extra opinion on their problems and such. Furthermore, I think that overall, just wellness is what keeps us going, and I think it is what gets us to focus on our responsibilities as students every day.
All right, thank you. The Hardenbrook ticket.
So I think the first thing of deciding what's most important is asking who are we serving. We have a massively diverse group of people here on campus, whether we have disabled students, students of color, non-traditional students who are parents, or other types of people with chronic illnesses. And so each organization is going to be important to every single person in different ways. And for me personally, the University Counseling Center has been massively important. And when we have like a month and a half wait for students to be able to visit someone, I think that's really detrimental to a large portion of our students here, especially with the gun violence that has happened on campus for the past 3 years. So that, I think, is one of the most important ones. The CDA office is amazingly important for getting people to the solutions that they need to be able to be a successful student here. And I think one of the other things that we really don't think about as a campus resource, but food on campus is really important, especially for those of us who live on campus. And one of the things that we want to implement is like a grocery store on campus so that there's more access to food that's not already prepared, more access to food that fits individuals' needs and isn't, how is the food on campus? Let's get going. And a SNAP program for students who aren't able to afford food, so that way not only will they be able to eat on campus, but they'll be able to get good food from a grocery store.
All right, thank you. The Coombe ticket.
All right, so we've also done a lot of talking in circles at times about this, but I think the biggest thing that we would harp on the ticket, it's really easy to think right away what resources are the most important, especially in regards to yourself. But one thing that personally touched me was the child care program that we offer here. We're one of the few universities here who have the opportunity for students who do have children to come have a place for them to interact with other kids on campus and to be watched and stuff like that. And there was a point 2 years ago when I was a freshman where they were about to close down the program because they didn't reach a certain criteria and they needed funding. And so working our way back, I think that it's really important to pay mind to those student populations. There have obviously been other things that have gone into place. I mean, right outside those doors, you have the place where there's the feeding area for mothers who are nursing and whatnot. But yes, that along with mental health, I think that the Center for Student Wellness and really focusing on the idea that there's a lot of attention towards that now, especially with the new building that is going up thanks to the huge donation by the Huntsman family. But also looking at that as what are the things that's going to prevent you from coming to school, saying that you're going to a doctor's appointment or see your surgeon about a torn ligament as opposed to I'm going to see my psychiatrist because I don't feel a certain way. I think that it's important to recognize that those two things don't warrant a different response and that we look at those things as one entity. And so having the resources that provide for that just as much as we would elsewhere. We're a huge medical campus, and I think that it's about time that we transition to recognize a medical capacity in both regards from physical and mental health.
Okay, thank you. So now we are at the second portion of our event where we're going to ask audience members to give questions to our candidates. It will be a little bit more difficult to swap candidates, so I would suggest to each of the tickets to have one person represent the ticket for this portion.
Do you want me to? Okay.
All right, and so our microphone for audience members is over here with our lovely Vanna White Justin. So please step up and ask a question for our attendees.
Not everybody at once.
So is it general or is it like specific ticket questions?
You can ask a general ticket question or you can ask a specific ticket question. Please just keep it short and respectful.
Okay. So this question is for the Nassar ticket. One of your points to help have campus safety was increasing police presence in like high traffic areas, and I'm wondering, considering like the damaged relationship that most of the student body has with the police, how that would actually make students feel safer.
So that's not necessarily what we're advocating for, and I think that was a miscommunication on our part. We're actually advocating for making sure that during busier times throughout the year that police are in areas where they should already be, which are these high areas. And we understand that's with this detrimental relationship right now that we're not going to get to this point. After meetings with chiefs of safety and such, we want students to have a voice in police presence and police, what's the word I'm looking for, procedures and such. So first off, we want to repair that relationship. Second off, we want to make sure police are doing their jobs in important areas and doing them effectively to make sure they are not only helping students no matter of who they are, but also they're being respectful. Because we're advocating for certain spaces to be open for longer, we want to make sure that there are precautions taken to make sure that the students are safe on both a general level and an administrative level. And we feel like that as long as we take the time to fix and amend that relationship, that we can also take the time to make them effective on campus. When we generate student involvement, we generate student community, we can do that. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. Our next audience question, please.
Yeah, so I know that the Coon ticket and the hardware ticket talks about how, in regards to safety, we need more student involvement, especially within the administration and on an administrative level. So having like that seat at the table, and as a student, like how will you, I guess, influence administration with your position to have like students be a part of that whole process?
Let's begin with the hardware ticket.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we've really been pushing for, this is kind of like our really big main goal, at least with an Unsafe U and especially with our campaign, is to establish a permanent student oversight board for campus safety. So they would be able to call for hearings, investigate different patterns of misconduct, and also independently review different campus safety initiatives. So they would have that whole review process already in their task. So within that, the administration would have to report to that student oversight board with regards to whatever initiatives that they're doing on campus or maybe wrongdoings that have happened on campus. That's kind of the main thing. Another thing would be that we would also have a student advisory board that would facilitate reviews of the SafeView website and also of the chief security officer. So there would be like two different boards there that have two different tasks, but those are kind of the main things there.
Okay, thank you. The Coon ticket.
So our big thing in regards to ensuring student voices are being heard is to keep it as pure as we possibly can. A lot of these meetings are conducted they have agendas, and not a whole lot of students know about the agendas or when the meetings are taking place, where they're taking place. So I think that first thing is ensuring that there's more knowledge about these things for students. A lot of these meetings are also open for students to attend. And so ensuring that students know about that is going to be huge, because if you already feel like you can't be there, then you won't be there, and you need to be there. I think in addition, we want to expand the number. There are a lot of committees and such, like I sit on the parking and Public Transportation Committee, for example. And I think one thing that we should be doing is expanding the number of student spots on these committees, so that more and more students can have their say, and keeping it pure, as I was saying. I think just kind of keeping that communication open, like if we can find more and more ways for us in ASUU to be telling students, hey, this is how this meeting went, this is what went down, this is what they're wanting to talk about next time, this is when the next meeting will be, this is where it will be. Just all of those things are going to come together, and keeping that voice as pure as possible. I think it's not so much about what I say or how I say it, but it's about what you say and how you say it, and keeping it intact.
Okay, thank you. As a reminder to the audience, please specify if the question is a general question for all tickets or just for particular tickets, just for the ease of conversation. All right, go ahead.
So my question is for all of the tickets, but as most of us know, 2020 is a major election year, both nationally with congressional seats opening up and the presidency, and locally with half of the state legislature seats opening up. What efforts will your ticket make to increase student civic engagement so they have a voice in their future 4 years?
Let's begin with the Nassar ticket.
Awesome, thank you for that. It's going to be a very high-stress time, as most of you are going to be aware. Tension will be high. Politics are a very delicate subject, as all of you can remember. One of the things the Nassar ticket is going to do is to establish, not only on an ASUU level, on a student level, but also on an administrative level, an acceptance for whatever you believe in. Now, that does not mean that we will tolerate any form of discrimination or hate speech, etc. But that does mean, though, that you should be free to believe in whatever form of politics you do believe in. We also, again, with these forums and such, but also lifting up student stories, right? We want students to believe that they do have a place on this campus. So as student government, we're going to do our best, and within our positions do our best to make sure each of those students recognize that they have that place, whether it is making voting accessible to all students, whether it is through establishing as a student government that everyone has an equal vote or such, or just encouraging students to vote due to its importance. That's how we plan on that.
All right, thank you. The Hardenbrook ticket.
This is a really great question. So I do some work with local policy, and I'm always a little bit concerned with the lack of representation that we have from the youth side with regards to local politics, but also national politics. So one thing I've noticed over the past couple of years here at the U is every time that we have an election cycle, a more like concerted effort every time from ASU to try and get more people to vote. But I think one thing that we need to do is have people reaching out to different parts of campus more aggressively. And by different parts of campus, I mean both physically, but also to different demographics of students. For example, we have a lot of non-traditional students, which we've spoken about a lot. And a lot of those students come to campus but leave very quickly. So we need to find a way to target those students. I'm not sure what that would look like, but I would like to have some discussions around that as soon as possible. Let's see, there was something else I was going to say that just slipped my mind. But the main thing is really, so usually the problem is when you have a low voter turnout is just because they aren't aware that elections are happening or don't see a reason why they should care. I think this is also an issue with ASU elections, but it's also an issue with local and federal elections. So I think having more education for our students, and not just within classes, but around campus on why it's important for them to vote, what are the issues that most concern them, and then kind of making it maybe more streamlined to understand who the candidates are, why they're running, what their issues are, what their stances are, so that they have a more informed vote as well.
Thank you. The Coombe ticket.
So I really liked what Walker and Rebecca were talking about, because I think a huge part of it is breaking down the stigma around politics and making as many spaces as possible on campus more welcoming and open to talking about political processes. In addition, I love that we have opportunities to vote on campus. And I think one thing we really want to do is expand that. I think, to my knowledge, the library is a big place for voting. Maybe we should have every building be an opportunity to vote. Maybe it's crazy, but it's such an important process that we don't want to leave any even potential barrier to, to students being able to participate in such a thing. I think one exciting thing that's happening is that the vice presidential debates are going to be happening on our campus, and that is huge. And I don't want to say take advantage, but we need to understand how huge it is and limit the barriers that may come into play and for students being able to be there and participate. So I don't know if that maybe we have to hold a certain amount of seats for students. Maybe that's crazy too, but again, this is a very important it's a very important process to be involved in. It's a very exciting time, and we are among the most important voices that need to be heard when it comes to these things.
All right, thank you. Next audience question.
Awesome. So my question is for all tickets. So a major issue that all college students face is going with finances and things like that. And reading the elections packet, I saw that tickets can be reimbursed up to $2,000 for their campaign budget. So how will you combat the alienation that has been created for some students who feel like $2,000 is a lot of money and should go somewhere else that they may feel is more productive, and that it may feel frivolous to spend on something like this campaign?
That was a bit of a long-winded question. Does everyone understand? Okay. Then let's begin with the Coombe ticket.
I would like to start by saying, you're right, $2,000 is a lot of money. I remember learning the figure and thinking, oh, wow, that is a lot. I think that it comes down to finding a balance between how can we ensure that students know about what's going on, but at the same time, how can we make sure that we're not, being, like you said, frivolous with funds. I'm very much open to that amount being lowered, but again, I think as far as balancing it, we should maybe find more creative, cheaper ways to ensure that students still know about what's going on and that they can feel encouraged to participate in the elections, because as you all know, we have a historically low voter turnout and participation in these things. And so I think that would be the thing that I focus on more is, let's limit funds, but then also find more ways to get students involved.
Thank you. The Hardenbrook ticket.
So I was just having a conversation with my friend about this today, looking at all of our swag while we were doing this. I didn't know if we were going to actually give all of it out. So I think that there's a couple things going off of what Ephraim said. One of them being that maybe we should hold more like town hall type events where we're asking students to come and be a part of something rather than just giving away materials. And then that obviously that would be cheaper. It would also include more students and have them be a part of the conversation rather than us just throwing stuff at them or kind of like talking at them. A second would be to make campaigns more sustainable. This is something that our campaign wants to push. Of course, sustainability is one of our 3 pillar points of our platform, and that would be included in maybe like reviving this part of the elections process. So having campaign materials that we choose to be sustainable part of campus that benefits students in the future, but also if you're giving away specific materials, those materials will benefit students in like their daily lives.
Thank you. The Nassar ticket.
Thank you so much. I agree. That number was astonishing, right? Like being someone who's not in an ASUU, looking at the elections bracket and seeing that for the first time, that's a lot of money. One of the things that I think we need to do, along with lowering that budget rate, based upon discussions and such, is also giving whoever's running financial training, so they can understand how to spend that money effectively. I think both of you answered this question beautifully with sustainable options and access and such, but I think teaching students how to use money correctly is something that we really need to do. I also think that we have a lot of talented students on this campus, some that are really talented in photography, videography, graphic design, you name it. All of us have used different individuals to help us with our work. You've seen our buttons, our shirts, everything. And I think encouraging some kind of system where students who are super successful in these fields, maybe to do it as an internship kind of course credit, anything along those lines to, or volunteer hours even, in order to promote their work would also be really effective and a cheaper option. That money, I agree, can go to a lot of different places. Maybe it goes to financial trainings that all students get to participate in, and those who are running have a mandatory attendance too. But I think definitely, like, budgets need to be looked at in order to make sure money is going to an adequate place.
Thank you. Next audience question.
This is a general question for all the tickets. I think that student clubs and organizations are a really big deal for students, just so that everybody feels they have a place on campus and a group that they can relate to and belong to. And I know that just last year, a lot of clubs received a major budget cut. It was down like to a third of what it was the year before, and it definitely affected us a lot. What sort of plans do you guys have to, I guess, increase accessibility to funding for student clubs, and also like help them reach a broader horizon of students so that we can make sure every student feels included and safe on campus?
All right, let's begin with the Hardenberg ticket.
Yeah, so this is one of our major concerns as well of our 3 pillars organizations is one of those 3. So the major one that I just want to answer that question with is we would be increasing the budget for student orgs overall, the 600 plus orgs that we have on campus, from 200,000 to 500,000. We actually do have a plan for this. This wouldn't be through an increase of the student fee at all. It would just be a reorganization of the budget and reworking of that. So of course that would be conversations that we have to have with the rest of both the executive branch of ASUU, but our advisors and things like that as well. But it's definitely doable. We've looked into it and we have a specific plan for this. So that would increase the budget by quite a bit. But you're right, these organizations are kind of an integral place where students are being involved. Much more so, at least in the reach currently, than ASUU has, and I think that's where we need to tap into and support those organizations. So that would be our strategy.
All right, thank you. The Nasser ticket.
Thank you so much. Like all of us who are focusing on student orgs, one of the things we want to do is to have more direct partnership with ASUU and student orgs with different resources on campus. There are a lot of student organizations that work on projects and such that a lot of other resources on campus work with, right? There are students who are directly devoted to decreasing the amount of food waste on campus and making it recyclable. There are students who are directly focused on specific majors and specific groups, like LGBTQ groups and science groups, for example, or mental health groups. So I think one of the things that we want to do is increase not only their advertisement, but our direct partnership. And following through on those, right, and making sure that they're well accessible and such, whether it is through, again, posting through the University of Utah's page or just more direct conversations. I think that can be really effective. Furthermore, I also want to increase the budget, not as much as the Hardenberg ticket, because that's a lot, but at least by $100,000 and starting again on that 5-year plan where maybe it's 100, the next year we see how effective that is, moving up to 200, 300 or more, to make sure student groups are getting the adequate amount of funding they need. And then lastly, we think that the funding process itself needs to be changed. We think it's right now a very bureaucratic process. The assembly votes on these things. It's a lot of people in there deciding the fate of one group. We want to simplify this process down. We want to take out one specific part where they separate into these 2 committees and such, and these committees decide and and eventually move towards where student orgs, the director of student orgs, has his own committee to take care of these kinds of things, because we believe the fact that 45 people should not be deciding the fate of an entire club. Rather, it should be a smaller group of students who really take the time to not only look into the ethics and the funding and everything else, but also make sure that everything's affordable and such.
Thank you. The Coombe ticket.
So I very much like the points that you guys discussed, especially with increasing the budget. I think that's the first and foremost thing that needs to be done. But I really liked the point in your question where you talked about accessibility. Especially when you were talking my language. I think that yes, we have to increase the budget, but then we also have to increase the awareness of the multiple avenues that student groups can attain funding from. I don't know if we should completely absolve the assembly of all their responsibilities, but surely we should make it easier for you to figure out who your assembly representative is and how they can help you, and maybe simplify that process. And then also increasing the capacity of our student org resource center. We have that, and the people who are working in that center are really great, but maybe there should be more people, because there's a lot of student organizations on our campus. So increasing that, because I feel like when we increase that capacity, then we're able to do more than just have students come to ASUU and ask questions, but maybe we can go to the students and just this idea of not just opening the door, but going outside of the door, especially in regards to funding.
Thank you. Next audience question.
Okay, I had a different question, but you guys kind of answered it, so it threw me for a loop. But this is going to be a general question asking about, as you increase the budget for student organizations, it's going to naturally decrease the budget in other boards on ASUU. So I was just wondering what your opinions were on those boards and how they increase involvement with the events that they throw on campus, and how that increase in budget with student organizations will affect that negatively or positively.
All right, let's begin with the Hardenberg ticket.
So most of the budget increase actually for student orgs that I was talking about will come from some funds from KED. So KED does fund large concerts on campus. I will just say, as a student who's been here for 6 years, I have not been to a single Rec Fest, and that's not to say that nobody's been to them. This is definitely something that lots of students do attend, like a good portion of students. But I've heard from lots and lots of students on campus that they'd like to see more local artists mixed in with more high-profile artists, in maybe sort of like a Kilby Court style concert series, where you have a full-day concert series, different stages, maybe in different locations on campus. And of course, that's a big endeavor. But if you also have local talent and local workers, people who are manning the stages and putting up stages and providing equipment, then that will also be a lot cheaper than bringing in bigger sources. So there will be some portion of that budget that can be transferred over, but as I mentioned, we wouldn't not be increasing any student fees as well.
Thank you. The Nasser ticket.
Awesome. So one of the things that we think is, one of the things we can do is increase fundraising, right? We can do outside fundraising and also support outside fundraising for these student organizations. How that allocation is going to look, I'm going to be very honest with all of you, I'm not 100% certain. I don't have an entire background in ASUU. I have a background in IFC and Greek life, and I understand those budgets well. ASUU is not my general forte, I guess, which we can all call as my general weakness, but I do really believe in outside fundraising, and ASUU can easily work with sponsorship and advertisement for these groups in order to obtain that, and to obtain that publicity. Also, we can work towards getting scholarships to work with these student groups as well, and funding their efforts and such in order to help increase their budgets and what they can do and the events that they can put on. I think that we have a lot of stuff that a lot of students are really interested in, and we need to do whatever we can to make them feel that they can be involved in such. So yeah.
Thank you. The Coon ticket.
I really like that question, because there's a lot to consider with budget changes. And in the particular circumstance of increasing it for student groups, I think that we have to consider that there are multiple ways that students get involved. And I think that we should be increasing the budget for student groups. I couldn't really give you a solid number, just because we do have to consider, well, yes, students are involved in student orgs, but they're also involved in these boards. They're also involved in these events that these boards put on. And so finding that balance again is going to be huge. And then I think that as finding alternatives for funding for student groups is going to be huge also. And I really like the idea of outside fundraising for that purpose. But ultimately, I think it would require a deep looking into of all the things that ASUU, that this budget offers for students, and seeing, well, if we do this, what won't we be able to do? And trying to lessen the things that we won't be able to do, and then find creative solutions for expanding the things that we can do for students.
All right, thank you. Next audience question.
Yeah, so this is for all of the tickets, but so specifically through your platform, how will you increase inclusivity on this campus and make a more inclusive environment, especially because all of you have kind of touched on non-traditional students, minorities, underrepresented populations on campus, and I just want to know, like, specifically through your platform, how you would address these kinds of issues.
All right, let's begin with the Coombe ticket.
I remember learning something recently that this term access and inclusion, and I really liked it. Our platform is on access, and I thought about the fact that if it isn't inclusive, then maybe it really isn't access. And so I think we can't rely on saying, oh, you know, our door's open, you know, come in, interact with us. We can't really rely and lean on that, especially because we have so many different types of students that attend our school, and then all of them need to feel included. I think that inclusivity means we need to go to different departments, student organizations. It'd be really cool. Something I want to do is attend as many meetings of student organizations as I possibly can, because I think that's the way that you truly make someone feel included. Is I shouldn't be standing 5 feet away from you with my hand out. I should come out to you and then extend my hand, and then we can talk about the things that are making you feel not included, and then specifically focus on what things we can directly do to make you feel included.
Thank you. The Hardenberg ticket.
So most, or all of actually of the ideas that sorry, I lost you on the call. All of the plans that I've talked about, I've referenced, and that we have posted on our Instagram actually will not cost students any money, and they'll save them money in the long run. So that, on one hand, is going to be more inclusive for students, right? We're not going to increase student fees to be involved in stuff, or increase student fees to have resources on campus that maybe that student won't access for a long or almost all of their time here at the U. One thing right now, too, that I want to stress is that a lot of the solutions that are being implemented at the U is that we are asking for them to be made, and then they're being made in some sense. So we need to increase student voice. And again, I'm kind of repeating what I said earlier, and not student voice just through hearing sessions, but through positions of power at the table, through these advisory boards, through these task forces that are student-run and kind of oversight commissions. I would say all of the platforms, all the specific platforms that we've released are all inclusivity based. So they increase all inclusion of all forms or all groups of students on campus. One thing I do want to say, someone pointed out on our Instagram, is that everyone on our ticket is white or white passing. So we don't have maybe that best reach to students of color. And I think the first step for our campaign, if we're elected, is to kind of look in towards our whiteness and kind of see how do we benefit from that? What can we learn from students of color? And then what can we do to be their allies and not ask them to make all the solutions and implement them, but how do we do that working with them? So this is kind of tying in what I said with working with CESA, working with different offices that work with these groups of students, instead of just kind of asking them to do it for us.
Thank you. And before I let the Nassar ticket answer, I'm just going to cut off the audience questions in the interest of time. So these last 2 questions will be our final questions from the audience. All right, the Nassar ticket.
Thank you so much. The one thing that I think all 3 of us have in common, and everyone in this room has in common, is our privilege. We're all university students that not everyone in this world gets to be. I in particular am white passing, I'm queer, I have a lot of ways that I pass in different areas, and I have a lot of privilege in and of myself. And I think that being said, I want to use that privilege in order to support others, and I want their voices to be raised in some way, shape, or form. I think through going out, like as the Coombe ticket stated, and going to these different groups, different student organizations, to encourage them to run for positions in ASUU, to kind of change up the way that student government looks, to invite new people in and new perspectives in, I think will be huge. I further think that establishing more committees on ASUU in relation to different interests and such, whether they are expanding for inclusivity or you name it, I think all of the above will allow for more perspectives and more voices to be heard. I further think that if we can find ways to get the majority of students, whether they are the typical cis white gendered male or what name you, to support, whether it is Pride Week, Black History Month, you name it, on this campus, and making those events huge, I think can also be another way we can get stories to be uplifted. I think the one thing that this campus can really struggle for, and I know from my own personal experience, is the fact that you don't get to know everyone. It's 30,000 people large, and it's very diverse in its perspectives and such, and I believe that if we can start to bring people together to generate an understanding and a level of respect for one another, that we can start to help with these issues in beliefs and inclusivity.
All right, thank you. Next audience question.
Hi, I think one issue that a lot of students are concerned about right now that hasn't been mentioned is the rising cost of tuition. What is ASUU's power to influence that, and what do you plan to do about it?
Is this a general question for all
Yeah,
tickets?
this is for everybody.
Okay. Let's begin with the Nassar ticket.
Absolutely. I think that is an excellent question because tuition is expensive, right? A lot of students come from in-state and they get that cheaper kind of in-state tuition, but then there's a lot of students who come from out-of-state who apply to get in-state tuition in order to make ends meet and such, to be able to have a multi-year experience here at the University of Utah. I think one of the things in particular that we want to do is promote scholarships to all students. Emily, who's not here today in particular, really wants to focus on students who experience homelessness and have disabilities in order to make sure that they're getting adequate scholarships and stuff to be able to make ends meet. So whether it is through living, food, or being able to pay tuition, as you stated, being able to make sure that they can have those resources. I further think, too, that ASUU's job as being a voice for students, it is our job to help connect them to different resources. So whether it is developing expansion efforts in order to help students, whether it's canvassing or such, to have direct contact and kind of facilitate them to meet resources to help them find scholarships and stuff, I think will be really huge. Now, again, like I said, my big flaw is not understanding the budget 110% like maybe my opponents might, but I definitely think that something that the Nassar ticket will be committed to is finding ways that we can help decrease that from an ASUU perspective and side.
All right, thank you. The Coombe ticket.
So in regards to what ASUU can do about it, there is representation in, say, like the Academic Senate and the Board of Trustees, where a lot of these important decisions are being made. And so in regards to what we would do about it, we have to approach it from multiple ends. I think first, in those meetings, like those Academic Senate meetings and those Board of Trustees meetings, we have to, of course, advocate for ensuring that the tuition doesn't go up. And, you know, it'd be really great if we could even get it to go down. I know there's like a lot of circumstances and considerations that have to be made, but first and foremost, being in those meetings and being present and resoundingly stating that we don't want our tuition being increased because it's already high as it is, right? But then on other ends, we also have to, and for one, we have to demand that for this increase, the school also should be finding more and implementing more and more ways for students to be able to afford this tuition. I think that we have to be looking into making payment plans easier, ensuring that, you know, if you are on a payment plan, that you're not getting your registration put on hold, or, you know, retrieving your transcripts on hold or anything like that. I definitely agree with the expanding of the awareness of scholarships and different programs such as that. but just focusing on those two main ends, like in the boardroom, no, let's not increase tuition, but then on the other hand, let's find more and more ways to make this school affordable.
Thank you. The Hardenbrook ticket.
So at the beginning of my answer here, I kind of want to talk from a more specific perspective. So 6 years ago, when I started my education here, my student fees were $240 less than they are now per year, which is maybe not that much because you can't pay that much rent, but it is a lot for, I would say, all students here on campus. That's a huge increase. And actually, we have a student fee advisory board where the president, the VP of Student Relations, and the Senate chair for ASUU sit on that board, which is about 50% of the membership of that board. So they have a significant influence over what fees are implemented every time that some new fee is introduced. My VP for University Relations, Devin, who isn't here, she did sit on that board for a year from 2017 to 2018, and so she knows that process very well. And so when you make a recommendation through that board, it goes to the university's president's office and the board of trustees, and it's usually really rare for a recommendation to be overturned once it's approved by the board. So ASU has a huge influence on that. So one thing we would do is commit to not increasing student fees. That's our big commitment. The second thing, I think, and this one I don't have a strategy on, but I think we need to take this to a more like state level, to the Capitol, and talk to them about how do we make education more affordable for all students in the state of Utah. You know, this is a larger conversation, than just at the U. This is an accessibility issue for students in our state and the nation, and other states have already started looking at this level. Other cities have started looking at making education affordable or free, like San Francisco and community college. So I think we need to turn in that direction and start moving there in a legislative push.
All right, thank you. Our final audience question.
Are you go with me on this one?
All the tickets offer some solution of safety for the university. Much of these imply that individuals perpetrating on campus are not a part of the student body, but many of us know that that is not true. Victim survivor advocacy is an unrepresented and often shamed resource here at the U. What would you all propose to begin prevention and further treatment for sexual assault, interpersonal violence, etc., as well as the resources for survivors with and perpetrators still remaining on campus?
All right, let's begin with the Coombe ticket.
I really like the point about understanding that the perpetrators sometimes are members of the student body. And so I do like that the University Police Department they've increased the number of victim advocates in their force, and so I think that we should increase the number in their force, but also increase the number of victim advocates in other offices and areas on campus, so that it's not just through the police department that these resources can be attained. I think bystander intervention is also very huge, and the more that we are normalizing it, the more we're contributing to this idea of keeping each other safe and playing into that prevention that you were talking about. I think those are the two biggest things. It's increasing not only the number, but the areas in which victim advocates can be found, and then also increasing things like bystander training and the awareness of resources on campus.
Thank you. The Hardenbrook ticket.
So I want to piggyback off of what was just spoken about. In the unsafe U demands, one of them is to develop a safe U certification program for staff, faculty, and the University Police Department officers to complete. I think this just touches on that point of like having more resources for students to reach out to people, since a huge issue with this is just underreporting of issues because people don't feel like they're going to be heard and they don't feel like any action is going to be taken. And I think that we have a track record that sort of supports that concern for students. A second one, or like kind of the next step, is one that is reported. We do want to make it so that if any student has reported like sexual violence or assault or harassment, they must have an initial confirmed contact within 12 hours. We don't have that currently. For example, the other day I had to report something to the Title IX office that I had happened to me on campus, and I wasn't contacted for 5 days. So this is an issue that's going on campus, and the main one is just that response time. We also need to have really a zero tolerance policy for these types of behavior, looking into it, of course, having like equity and fairness for all parties involved. But we need to start believing women and believing people who are reporting these issues on campus. And so those are like the main 3 things I'd like to see.
Thank you. The next ticket.
Thank you so much. I think this problem is 2 parts. One, I think it's shame for sex, and I think it's a lack of resources. I think students on this campus don't talk about it enough. I think this state doesn't talk about it enough. This state has an abstinence-based education with 2 districts in particular that are abstinence-only education. I think that needs to change. I think students in particular need to learn how to have safe sex and how to have responsible sex. I think students should be encouraged and taught more how to say no and what those situations can look like. One of the things that the Nassar ticket in particular is advocating for is a sex week on campus with the help of administration and students in order to not only increase relations between the 2, but also to promote these conversations about what this can look like. I further think that with this conversation, students will be more likely to report. Now, I can't speak for everyone, but I do think the second part of this issue, the resources, is touched on by both candidates very clearly and very well. And we want to increase the number of victim advocate survivors on campus and their resources and advertising those resources. We strongly believe in the fact that victims should be heard and believed, that their experiences should be something we put first and take into an account. And I think following through after we've had these advocacy meetings and giving them equal therapy opportunities on campus, making accommodations, whether it be based upon schedule and such, finances, you name it, in order to give them the access they deserve is ever more important, because I think that in particular students who have experienced some form of trauma deserve help. And now, as much as I want to, I believe that we should do our best to help everyone.
All right, thank you. And that concludes our debate. Please join me in a round of applause for all of our candidates. All right, please grab pizza in the back. There's so much pizza, I don't want to take any of it home. Go get some. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry I didn't get your name. Heather, nice to meet you. I'm Haley.